like to call to order the meeting of the Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium. Welcome. Do we have any special guests today that I have no notes on? Okay. Welcome to all of the members today. Thank you very much for traveling here to Akron. We appreciate your participation very much. Do we have anybody for public comment? Nobody's signed in? Nope. Okay, then moving on to action. First item and only item of action is the approval of the minutes from the January 22nd, 2013 meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll second.
Joe Hadley and Mike Challenger.
I just have a comment. On 3A, my name is spelled incorrectly.
We will correct that, and we apologize. Coming from a person whose name is most often spelled wrong, I understand. Okay, next item. Oh, I'm sorry. So we had a first and a second motion, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. For discussion, board organization. Hunter, would you like to address the issues of primary and alternate representation?
Madam Chair, yes, I think we sent out in people's packets. We still need to get the formal appointment of several of the primary and alternate representatives and filling out the conflict of interest form. And if you would get that to Jeff Anderley before we have to go after you on both of those, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the work plan review. This is a very robust discussion, and I know will be very interesting for us all. Hunter?
Okay, Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize to several of the members of the executive committee, and I would ask to make sure that if you didn't sign in, you could do so before you leave to make sure that we've got the full list of executive committee members that may have come in early. But what I want to do today is go through a review of where we are. We are at a critical point now. We have engaged Sasaki and their team. And we have spent the last month with their team making decisions with the advice of the Technical Steering Committee on the demographic and economic numbers to put into the scenario planning model. We have been working also with city architecture and with our staff to load in information on the individual parcels and on identification of building and development typologies, which we'll talk about. We talked a little bit about how these models come together, and not to get involved in getting in the weeds here, but I think it's important that you have an understanding of what the process is and what we will get out of this in terms of a tool for this period of our work, but also as a tool moving forward. I would also point out that this work has been undergirded by the work over the last year by the consortium partners. The geographic information systems of the 4 metropolitan planning organizations and Cuyahoga County were enlisted to create an unprecedented land use, parcel-based land use and zoning map for Northeast Ohio for 1.8 million parcels. We are now going back with the Sasaki team and with the auditors to load in additional information on age of buildings and values of buildings and the like to make this a truly robust model and a tool. And we have worked at Eastgate with Dan Mamula's group to see how we can scale from the 12 counties down to a sub-area of one metro to see how this tool can actually be a usable product out of this entire process. So The key actions and activities of your staff over the last month, since we got together before, is in building the scenario planning model. Now that's what you do with these models. You build them around the geography that you're studying. We have a very large geography. It's the size of the state of Connecticut. It's 12 counties. It's very challenging in that regard. And in the other big challenge that we have is that almost all of these models were designed to deal with managing growth. And as you know, in Northeast Ohio, our overall population has been relatively stable. In fact, we've lost population since 1970, and the projections suggest more of the same. And we are managing, in fact, not growth, we're managing change. We're managing growth at the edges in a number of our counties, and we're managing population or depopulation, population decline in several of our other counties and in the core cities. So developing a model that works for us has been one of the major challenges that we have been working through. We've been working with the academic experts at Cleveland State and at the Center for Urban and Regional Studies at Youngstown State, who have actually been studying the phenomenon of disinvestment. The scenario planning tool itself helps the public and decision makers understand the long-term consequences of the decision we make today. That's why we're doing this. That's the tool for today. That's the tool for tomorrow. That's one of the key products of this effort together. So as you're explaining to folks why you're spending as much time and effort as you all have to meet together, one of the key things is to develop the tools so that we can make better public decisions that reflect our values. And we start, as we've talked before, with values. We're looking at a meeting and talking across Northeast Ohio, and we'll be doing that in April 30th, May 1 and 2, in 6 meetings across Northeast Ohio. These 6 values here are what have come out of a number of other scenario planning efforts. We're going to develop a list of values that bring us together, that we share across our region, and we're looking, and we've been building the language and the vocabulary and the photo archives that help us to describe our places. The scenario planning process itself is spatial. It works through the technology of geographic information systems, and you load into that information on building typologies. Now there are 30 categories that we've got to take all the different types of buildings that we've got in Northeast Ohio and put them into 30 categories. We reserve 4 categories for vacancy, for the absence of buildings, the absence of housing or light industrial, heavy industrial, or commercial, to deal with the realities that we have in Youngstown and Cleveland and many of our other cities. But this is the set of typologies that we've developed working with city architecture and with our Quality Connected Places work for Northeast Ohio. Several types of mixed use, multifamily residential, different types of single family residential. Again, examples drawn from our region. You won't see any stucco buildings from Santa Fe when we get out into the communities, because we've been looking across Northeast Ohio at good examples. Commercial, dealing with everything from strip retail and street front retail to lifestyle centers, heavy and light industry, public spaces, and then reuse. How do we begin to address reuse of our big boxes, of our warehouses, to loft conversions, of office buildings, things that we know are familiar with in our communities? And again, 4 categories of the absence of buildings. The second level of the work that goes to that we've been loading into the model out in Portland have to do with development typologies. And I won't get into all of the different development typologies, but in terms of neighborhoods and districts, we've looked at downtown residential and university college districts and senior living communities and transit-oriented districts. That then translates into actual place types. This happens to be one that's unique to Northeast Ohio, the Western Reserve Town Center. Now every county in the Western Reserve has a county seat, and many of those have that traditional development around a square, and there are other communities like Chagrin Falls that developed on that same New England model. So what we do is take and look at that grid of the uses and understand what are the component parts of that in terms of open space, and housing, and commercial, and cultural and assembly, so that can be used to essentially to paint those areas that have not been developed or needing redevelopment through Northeast Ohio. Part of what's instructing this work is the assets, and as we've talked about in the past, we've developed a robust list of assets. One of the things we're hoping to continue to add to, and we hope that you go on the site and help us do that, are assets in our communities. Well, we all talk about, we have symphonies, and we have zoos, and we have parks and wonderful places. Well, we've been positioning those on the ground. This happens to be Akron, where we look at the relationships between the Cascade Locks and the Art Museum and the government buildings, the park networks in Akron, and the university, to see their clusters. And some clusters people can readily identify, like University Circle in Cleveland, but others like Center City Youngstown are still emerging, but they have many of the same elements of a state university, an art museum, a symphony, a children's museum. Well, that's a cluster of assets around which to build. That's then also being categorized, identified, laid out, and fed into the modeling for those 1.8 million parcels in Northeast Ohio. The process that we're going to be going through over the next several months on the spatial side, on the physical side, starts with physical conditions, and this, as Fred Wright has pointed out, is not Northeast Ohio. This is Des Moines. This is a community that Sasaki and Ferganese have worked in, and they've shared with us some of their work there. You start with existing conditions in a community that is growing, and that's a multi-county metro area. Take a look at that area that's experiencing growth and says, well, what happens if we continue to grow until 2040? Well, we'll probably grow out, and we'll absorb most of the land and large lot residential development. Well, are there some options? Well, another option might be to continue to develop out, but not necessarily go with larger lots, and absorb less of that green space and agricultural land. Well, what happens? Individual communities have developed plans, as Youngstown has, and Cleveland has, and others. What if we put those on the ground? What does it look like? And finally, what happens if we simply step back and say, let's start how our forefathers started, with natural systems. We came together around a confluence of rivers. What if we look at the natural systems and see if that pushes back on development and shapes it differently? So those are the options that community came forward with. We expect to come forward with options for Northeast Ohio and for the 4 metros in Northeast Ohio that work for us. But something we haven't talked about very much, and we're going to talk about a great deal more next month's meeting when we bring the Sasaki team here, are the fiscal aspects, the dollars and cents, because each of the choices we make, including doing the same thing in the future that we've been doing in the past, has an impact on municipal budgets, regional budgets, institutional budgets. How do we get at that? Well, we link the scenario results and a spreadsheet analysis that essentially looks at the existing revenues and costs from your baseline, identifies what would be an appropriate level of service, again talking this through with subject matter experts locally, and applying those to the different scenarios to get the revenue and cost picture. What happens if you continue to develop business as usual? How many lanes of road, how many sewers, etc.? What happens with the other scenarios? That allows you then, and this is a very small example of a particular development site, but it allows you to look, do an apples-to-apples comparison on revenues and costs of different scenarios. That we think will be a very useful tool, and one we hope will be scalable and expect to be scalable to individual communities. This is the first, again, effort to really get at some of the issues that groups like the Fund for the Future have been talking about, which is the costs, and the Regional Prosperity Initiative have been talking about the cost of business, the cost of doing this. Well, how can we systematically get at this? And this is really the first effort to do that. Now, the scenario planning process, as we've talked about before, takes place in several inside-outside types of efforts. Right now, in March and April, we're in the inside phase, working across the country with our consultants to develop the business-as-usual scenario, fiscal impact analysis, and indicators that will be used to test those, some of which will eventually wind up in our dashboard. for permanent use, and some will be used simply for the testing of these models. Going out April 30th, May 1st and 2nd, and then with community meetings, and also launching for about 6 weeks the crowd gauge online tool, and our second of the 3 public opinion polls in April, May, and June. July, after the community meetings, to developing those alternatives based on what we've heard, coming back at the end of July with the alternative scenario workshop. In August, going again back and looking through those results to develop what emerging preferred alternative, taking that out in September, again to the community to see if that emerging preferred alternative actually has legs. Finally, in October, perfecting the report to the board and the public around our findings. Again, this is a very large area. It's the size of Connecticut. We have 12 counties to work through. We've identified basically 6 clusters of meeting sites to organize around. The Nowaka area basically has 3, one in western in Lorraine and Medina in the western suburbs of Cuyahoga, one in Lake and Geauga in the eastern suburbs of Cuyahoga, one in the city of Cleveland and the first suburbs of Cuyahoga County. One in the Eastgate area, the Ashtabula, Trumbull, Mahoning, one that'll be here on Summit and Portage, and one in Stark and Wayne. We will have 3 nights of meetings, 2 meetings each night to break the team up during those 3 days. And that will be the first, again, of the 3 meetings. That together, these are meetings of about 200 people, and we need your help in attracting people to those. In the aggregate, that is not, as given we've got 4 million people, that's not the only way we need to engage folks. And the second key element of the engagement is the crowd gauge online tool, which is a tool that allows individuals who do go online to identify their values, identify types of interventions or investments that can be made in furtherance of those values, to simulate putting actual money behind those ideas and seeing where with constrained resources, where their mix of values come forward. That becomes a key part of the analytics. Their second survey, which will be a telephone survey, will be used to validate and support that, asking some similar questions. They can't quite replicate the online tool on the telephone survey, but the idea again being to probe to see if we can get as good a sense of how people feel about what's important to them in their community and in the Northeast Ohio region. Something we've talked about before as well is the regional analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. For those of you who represent entitlement communities, you know that these AIs, the assessments, are required by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. As entitlement communities, I believe public housing authorities get involved in these. There are expensive propositions that these communities do every couple of years. HUD has asked its grant recipients to do that for their regions to see if there can be some cost efficiencies. It involves analysis. It involves a set of meetings in mid-March that we are inviting folks to. These fair housing forums. The calendar is available also on the webpage. The idea here is to reach out into the counties in those several days, but also to provide an opportunity for board members, particularly those who may not work this turf, may not really get involved with issues of fair housing or community development block grants, to really learn, share, create, and act together. We've got 2 webinars set up on the 21st and 22nd to go through the results of this, to understand what are the implications, because there are implications not just for those block grant recipient entitlement communities, but also for transit agencies and health boards and the like, and those concerned with economic development, about the nature of disparity and economic stratification in Northeast Ohio and what we might do with this. And the maps are very compatible with the mapping that's being done for scenario planning, so we're looking at ways to bring the 2 together. Finally, there's the action products, and Sarah's going to talk a bit about this because while we're going to spend next month very much drilled down on the scenario planning with the consultant team here, by that point we'll have loaded enough in the model to begin to have some really robust discussions. We cannot forget the other critical product of this effort, and that is the action product. So I've asked Sarah to talk at some greater length today about that, so because your involvement in that is going to be also very critical. Sarah?
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to see if there are any questions about the Fair Housing Forums that anyone has. We have Anthony Kovac, the program manager, back there. He can answer anything. Nothing? All right, then let's see. For the action products, you've heard me talk about this before. Along with the scenario planning process and the vision that's being created, we're coming up with products that can help achieve that vision. So we've identified dashboard, toolkit, and best practices, policy recommendations, and pilots as being impactful areas where we can really start making some change on the ground here. And so the dashboard's purpose is to visually represent what it is that we're trying to do and our progress towards making that reality here. So we have indicators that are being refined right now. We have a product group that's been assembled to work on the dashboard, looking at indicators from around the region that are already in place, like the ones that the fund has, as well as some national indicators. HUD has flagship indicators that the 2011 grantees have to use as part of their process. We're looking at those. So looking through the different indicators that are going to be most impactful for our region. So these could be, I know in the examples we've talked about before with San Diego's dashboard, like the days of closed beaches, since there's a lot of surfing out there and just interest in the water. That's important for people. That's a measure of quality of life. And so we're looking at what indicators are important for our area so we can start tracking progress towards them. And so up at the top, you have just the committee and a board engagement schedule for the different products. There's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes than that, but that's just kind of the larger schedule of when you'll be hearing more about these. And certainly if you have interest in participating further, everyone that submitted the Leverage Match Resource Survey, where they indicated what areas they were interested in working in, you're being contacted. But also, looking through and seeing these presentations, if there's anything that you want to work on, please grab me or someone from the NEOSCC staff after this meeting. So, and just to follow up on the indicators, you'll be hearing about indicators that are going to be used for the scenario planning process. Those are more physical or geographic indicators. These are different indicators that we're talking about for the dashboard. These are things that can be measured in very finite time periods. Their data is updated on a regular basis. So if you get a little confused from that, these are a different set of indicators. And next are the toolkits and practices. We're not here to reinvent the wheel on this. There's a lot of good things that are happening on the ground already in Northeast Ohio. Part of the challenge that we've all kind of figured out and coming together is it's hard to keep track of what all is out there. What are the resources and connecting each other to these resources? Because there's a community that might be 40 miles away, but they're dealing with the same issues. So what we're hoping with the toolkit and best practices is putting all this information in one place that is easy to query and organize, so you can look by topic or by whatever your development type is and see, all right, what are some solutions to problems I'm facing? And also through the engagement process, just hearing from the public too. What are the challenges that they're facing? What do they want to see change? And matching the toolkit and best practices to help meet those needs, putting the resources in everyone's hands. And then for the policy recommendations, going along with our preferred vision, we won't get very far unless we make some changes in actually instituting that vision. So the policy recommendations is taking a look at what is on the ground right now in terms of the business as usual case. How have we developed the way that we have? What are some of the constraints and some of the challenges with the way business is conducted now, and kind of a systemic approach instead of just focusing on one topical area, as has been the case for most of us. We just look at what's affecting us without realizing that everything is very well interconnected. So the policy group is writing up a framework to examine all this using the Conditions and Trends platform as kind of a springboard. There was a lot of information that was gathered as part of that, so we're using the information that we have and building off of it, and this will be synced up with the scenario planning results and the preferred regional vision to see what are the policies that need to be strengthened or modified to meet that vision, and also cross-referenced with some of the best practices and pilots and tools that are available to help with those changes, or proof that those changes can be impactful. And then finally, pilots are some of the proof on the ground of how these changes can impact our region. There are pilots that are proposed or in play already that we're looking at. Also, trying to figure out what are the criteria for what is going to be supportive of NEOSCC goals. So not just any pilot. There's a lot of work to be done in this area about identifying what is out there and really kind of honing in on, does NEOSCC itself perform pilots, or do our partner organizations conduct the pilots? So there's more that we'll be adding to the pilot section next time we talk to you about it. But in a nutshell, that's what we're doing as the additional piece along with the scenario planning process, so that in the end we don't just have the map and the idea of the vision, but we actually have some of the tools at our disposal to continue the momentum and actually start moving towards that. So, any questions? Bethia?
On the dashboard, is there a way, or are you already planning to use the crowd gauge tool to engage the public around the indicators?
The crowd gauge tool can have information on quality of life, and that's its main purpose, is really to get at what are the values that people have, and from that that helps refine what the preliminary indicators that the dashboard group is coming up with, is weaving in that engagement from the scenario planning workshops and also from crowd gauge to see, we've got a general sense of where we're going, but we need that feedback to really work in and make sure that if everyone is saying that they really want to make sure that the lake is healthy, that there's indicators that are associated with that.
So in that example, if it comes up that everybody wants to be sure the lake is healthy, and then this group develops an indicator around that. Mm-hmm. What is the plan for how to find out if that indicator resonates back with people?
As part of the feedback process, because in the business as usual case, that's the first time that we're going out really to the public and figuring out what matters to them. And the alternative scenarios is a way of testing some of that, and it's kind of an iterative process that there's going to be engagement and feedback the whole time, but that we're not just going out there and saying, all right, we listened to you and here it is, but that it can be refined and kind of processed back.
So it is built into the ongoing engagement.
Right, and that's where I said the kind of just very broad schedule of those few times that we have board and committee engagement. There's a lot more that's built in behind the scenes on that, of those cycles of feedback. So,
can you explain how the alternative scenarios are managed so that you know that this is not anecdotal suggestions about what might work as an alternative, but that someone with expertise is saying this has been done in Portland or this has been done somewhere else and is an alternative that you can actually implement with success?
Well, it is very much data driven. So it's, for one of the alternatives, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, like for the regional economic competitiveness strategy, the REX data on economy, if we pursue a certain track for economic development, what would that look like played out? So that's what one of the scenarios can be built around, is where would development need to occur, where would strengthening of infrastructure investments or utilization of space need to occur if we follow that track. So it's not just kind of grabbed out of the air, it's got a basis in some data points. And that's also where the expertise of Sasaki comes in, and Perganese. They've dealt with this across the area, or across the country. So we are relying also on them to say, you know, we do have experience in this, and pull in the other data sources to back it up so that it is defensible.
I don't want to really, if other people have questions. Building on Ed's question, I don't know how it all works within the scenario planning model. Presumably, if there's some alternative scenario that is a vision that people would like to see happen, there are potential policies that would need, for example, would need to be in place to make that happen. Is that then linked back to this policy group to figure out who's charging forward with it? Okay.
Yes. Yes, and the work of the policy, as I said, is cross-tabbed with some of the tools that are available so that they're not independent elements, that they are all kind of part of the entire process so that it's complete and so that we actually have the ability to move forward past just this planning phase so that things don't just stop in December. Well, and I guess also I'm not sure if some of these maybe are more directed towards Hunter if he wants to get up here, or are there any product related questions? I don't want to step on his toes. So.
Actually, I was going to preface mine saying this question's either for you or Hunter, or I think anyone else from the board that wants to weigh in. It seems like when you look at scenario planning, there's a couple different, well, there's probably 100 different ways you could look at it, but two primary ways you could look at it, kind of more at the micro level and the kind of tactical level with things about urban design or placemaking or how individual neighborhoods should look, kind of like some of the things that you presented, Hunter, that might be more, good planning, for lack of a better word. And a lot of that's implemented locally, even though we could have a regional discussion. And then you could also look at it more from the strategic perspective, looking at things like infrastructure, funding, land use planning, kind of comprehensively across the region, more questions of resource allocation, basically, and that would be more implemented regionally or even state policies and things like that. And preface it, I'm not sure what the best balance is, but it seems like good scenario planning would kind of be able to look at both of those things. And I think my question was twofold. One, is there any feeling from talking to NEOSCC maybe what that balance is going to look like, or maybe that's what we're trying to find with this engagement? But the second part of the question is, how will the board be involved in those discussions? Because I think the way that everything's laid out right now, we have these meetings which aren't maybe real conducive to kind of rolling up our sleeves and talking through issues. And then we will have the scenario planning engagement meetings, but those are kind of with a lot of people. And so will there be a conduit maybe to have a couple special board meetings or engage people from this group, but without the public there, but also, in a way that we're not getting bogged down by the business of the committee as a whole?
Well, and I think Hunter will probably be able to answer this best, but we have thought of that as worked into the schedule as well. So I'll hand it over to him at this point.
As usual, Jason, you ask all the best questions. No, you can't ask just one. I think the minutes will have to reflect the one meeting where Jason asked one simple question. First of all, I think some of these questions are going to be best directed at NEOSCC next month. This is a tool that is scalable. The planning base maps with the 1.8 million parcels are scalable. And we believe that it's an open source tool. We believe that this is a leave behind that an MPO could use. Say AMATS is the only group that ever wants to do any more of this stuff. Those two counties, we've got the base information for that. I've been working through with Dan Mamula just on a very preliminary basis to see how it looks when you really zero in on the communities along the Mahoning River. So the graphics and the databases are scalable. So it is a tool, I think, that you can work those scales. This is a region-wide plan, so it is going to be basically at a broad regional level. We're not going to get down to the block group. We're going to get the units of measurement are basically broken down to urbanized areas or urbanizing areas with a fairly small, about a 5-block geography, and then more rural areas with several acres, and to look at that. So we're not going to be able to, in this pass at it, to answer the question of what should go on 4th and Main. But the types of the development types that are being used in the individual cells are ones that are typical or found in Northeast Ohio. So you could again go back to how'd you build that idea up? You build it up from individual buildings, individual sites, individual coverage ratios, and returns on investment, and a lot of extensive detail that is a little bit mind-boggling as I've gotten into it. So I think it can be scaled. And I think it's the question that we ought to be you ought to be asking them next month in terms of how that works forward. To Sarah's point, we have baked in the expectation of additional meetings with the board. We have really detailed the work program in the first phase, which takes us through the May meetings, essentially, and have a lighter touch on the work program in the next 2 phases. And I think if working with the board leadership, if we want to bake in those work sessions around the alternatives so that the local judgment is as robust as possible, as it's been explained to me, you'll develop to get to the 4 or 5 options that we're going to be looking at in the public sessions. You'll go through 50, 100. You can push any idea to an extreme degree using a scenario plan, but I think that interaction between the board and the staff and the consultants needs to be robust, and I think we ought to work over the next several weeks to define how that might play out in an efficient and effective way. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Before we go on, are there any other questions?
Just to follow up on the scalability, do you expect that the financial impact modeling will be scalable as well, or how local will that be?
I don't know at this point. I think a lot depends on the data we can plug in. I think the technique is scalable. Whether we can, how much detail we can get into, be it sort of below the metro or the county level, I don't really know.
That's what people are going to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, but they will, in terms of what's it telling us. This is bear in mind, this is not a plan that comes out of it. It's a regional framework, which ought to give real coherence to the broad choices we have to make. But we're also introducing the idea of fiscal impact analysis, and we've looked at a number of been looking through consultants. We looked at a number of other firms, some of which are got a plug-in problem here, I think. Some of which can get into great detail because they're modeled around a specific set of circumstances, like what's it cost to put the road in versus not put the road in. So again, these are some questions I think we may be asking. We're trying at this level to come forward with a 12-county framework, which looks at the broad questions of where we're going, where we're growing, what's it cost to do that. Yes, sir.
When you went through the categories, I don't remember how many categories, a lot of those seem to be housing categories, commercial, or a lot of that seemed to be focused on the built environment, and I didn't see much on the natural environment or any categories of the qualitative analysis, let's say, of natural assets. Maybe you can think of it as natural infrastructure. So I just noticed that.
Yeah.
So it raises the question whether the analysis, how deeply it takes into account the cost-benefit analysis that incorporates that environmental piece.
Right. Again, we didn't get into some of that information is already, I believe, coming out of our conditions and trends assessment of watersheds, natural habitats, and the like. What we're laying out here to your point, were the building typology. We didn't put in parks. Those get modeled in a different way. And I can certainly get with the modeling firm and get the answer to how specifically that's going to be handled. But no, to get the assessment, for instance, there's some backup slides which we didn't include in this. To get that assessment for Des Moines, which show the natural systems, there's a whole level of analysis around soils conditions, habitat, watersheds, riparian corridors, etc., that goes into saying, let's do a scenario that is driven by the natural environmental framework, where the built environment is a dependent variable, not the independent variable. So yes, you can look at both. It's a McHargian overlay system that allows the landscape and the buildings to be looked at together.
Well, I guess it's a little bit of an open question as to the degree to which we will have that as part of the framework.
Right, I will get a more specific answer to that question, but I do. One of the reasons to involve a firm like Sasaki is they started out as a landscape firm, so their basic bias from the beginning is to look at those issues first. They're not an architecture firm that's learned how to do this. It really started out as a landscape firm. So the landscape framework, the habitat framework, the aquifers, watersheds, and the like, those elements, I believe, will be part of this analysis. The reason I went into building typologies is so much of our work is filling in the building types for the parcels. Yes, Chelsea.
Do you have a feel for the size of the Des Moines study area versus our 12 counties?
No, I don't. Joe, do you have any?
I believe Des Moines covered the region of it might have been a bit bigger than that, but it's not as large.
No, it's one basic metro area. No, I don't know the ours is considerably larger. It's one of the largest and most complex anybody's ever had to deal with.
I would say Hunter's probably about 25 miles circumference. Kind of run Route 80 that runs it, runs all the way to Des Moines. And it's off of 80 and 35, which is kind of consistent. So it's about a 25 mile circumference.
But we can get back to you on that specific question. Any other questions, Rob?
Hunter, you had mentioned this is an open source technology. Given the amount of resources that we're devoting to it, has there been any discussions on somebody like the MPOs or somebody owning this when this is done, so we can do, I mean, if the structure is already going to be set up, I could see theoretically an MPO doing future scenario planning, building upon what we have, possibly even looking at fiscal analysis. Is that something that, moving forward, is that discussion?
Grace may want to weigh in on, because Sasaki had that very question. Understand that every other grantee, with one exception, is an MPO. So they do it, they own it. What we have said from the very beginning was this work isn't going to wind up like the Doxiadis study, the data for which wound up in the basement of CSU and has never been seen since. Legally, the grantee is NOACA. As the grantee for a federal grant, they need to own and be able to demonstrate the location and continued maintenance of the work product that the feds have paid for a period after the closeout of the grant. So what we've instructed Sasaki is that NOACA is the repository of the data from both the West work and the files from Sasaki and Friganese. They will not maintain those after the grant unless we contract with them to do so. They will transfer them to the owner. And again, in this case, the owner is a consortium, but the grantee, who really has the fiscal responsibility for maintaining the documentation for a period of time, is Grace and the NOACA team. So we have said that with the understanding that the mechanics of that will need to be worked through. And that's, Grace, I think that's about as far as we've gone in the discussion. But they won't wind up nowhere.
Hello. Yeah, that's correct. That has been the idea that we've discussed. Also, in our executive committee meeting, we have begun to address the issue of the future of the consortium. So depending on the conversations over the next few months and where we think the organization will be officially at the closeout of the grant will help determine how we deal with the data. But most certainly, at the very least, I can commit that NOACA will take that responsibility.
And on a staff level, we've appointed Joe McDonald as the data guru. He is the main point of contact between our office and the consultant team. And one of the tasks is to basically keep an eye on that so that the data can be transferred in a seamless way to an appropriate repository. And it may wind up being physically at NOACA, it may be at some other place that you decide to contract with, but again, it won't be in the basement in unusable files.
I mean, I could see a scenario if an MPO was interested in maintaining their own data through a period of time. That's a pretty good mechanism to keep this moving forward if we're happy with the scenario planning. So it's intriguing.
The other thing that Patty just reminded me of is that the Sasaki and Friganesi have set up an FTP site for this project now. It's being maintained locally by city architecture, so that we again you can reach out and grab the folks that are uploading the information now. But to your point, going forward, this is part of a broader discussion, but we've made it very clear from the beginning that for the period of the grant, we have staff responsible for overseeing this and for making sure that at the end of the grant, assuming that there isn't a resolution or the resolution takes some time, the files get properly transferred to a local repository and are available. The point of it being open source, Bob, is that and one of the reasons I think we recommended the board that the combination of the Envision scenario planning software, which embeds within it the fiscal impact analysis work, our program, and crowdsource, which is also an open source tool that is being developed by Sasaki, is that it is available without further licensing fee complications to the local entity, NEOSCC or its successors, for continued use and hopefully for continued development. To Bethia's point, we've begun to ask the question, can we use this to test the alternatives? Can we use this to test the final case? How can we really use this tool? We're trying it out for the first time. We want to see how we grow this, because one of our critical commitments from the very beginning is to do planning and civic engagement differently in Northeast Ohio as a result of our work together. Yes, Freddie.
This is the scenario planning I get. The question, though, I have is for Sarah. I want to kind of revert back to the pilot, not pilot, but the toolkit question I have. Have there been any thought given to how you would capture information as it relates to the best practices in the region, as far as the toolkits are concerned?
Yeah, we already have a listing of a draft listing of best practices that has been assembled, as well as some of the tools that are available in the region and pilots. And so part of what we're doing is going through and making sure that we have some criteria in place, so it's not just anything, but that relates to the mission of NEOSC, and making that information available in such a way that it's not just a big long list that no one's going to really be able to take the time to go through, but where it's tailored to saying what your need is or what your community type is. And so we have looked at some of the best practices, but there's also as part of the toolkit, working groups mandate is going through and querying and trying to get additional best practices. So it's actually going to be a request for best practices process that starts up in the end of March or early April, to go out to the communities and say, what do you know that's out there that's working well in case we miss some, and seeing what kind of resources and expertise we have in the area.
So those will be submitted via what means? Presentations, videos? What type of thinking are you talking about specifically when you're talking about capturing this information? So if I'm in Cleveland and they got something going on over in Canton that, you know, applies to us, and we want to know, you know, the specifics of what they're doing, you know, rather than being a list like you just mentioned.
Right.
What type of, you know, interface will I have to access that?
Well, in terms of the request for best practices, we were thinking just as a written format, but other submissions, it's more just I guess probably an email thing for size, but we do have the FTP site, and that's an interesting idea, is to do it in different formats as well as just written. So, you know, open to suggestions to work it that way. And the toolkit working group is getting together next month, so that's something that can be
Did he just
worked
volunteer to the tour?
Oh.
I think he did.
Hunter saying you volunteered.
Thank you for volunteering.
I kind of had a follow-up to that. Is there, well, this is a much shorter two-part question. The first part was, are we trying to capture any best practices from anywhere outside of Northeast Ohio? And then the second question was, is there a way to maybe incorporate some of what you were just answering, Freddie's question, into the engagement part of this? Because I think it would be really valuable to have kind of face-to-face knowledge transfer and learning by doing between maybe some of the best practices somewhere, so it does come to life a little bit, and it's not just, well, here's a list, you know, a reference list, which would be useful in some ways, but maybe not quite as compelling as actually, you know, kind of talking to people that have done some of these best practices.
Well, I think I'll answer the second part first. Yes, in terms of the engagement at the regional caucuses, that's a really good place to have some of that knowledge transfer occur. And certainly as more word spreads on what we're doing, I think we'll get more input from people all over the region saying this is, you know, what works, this is what doesn't work, and we can take some of that information. And then for the first part of it, in terms of, I blanked actually. Outside the region, yes, sorry. Outside the region, yes, we are looking at that, and that's actually where HUD has been a good resource. They've been assembling a lot of this information as part of the initiative, since there's a lot of these projects going along that, you know, there are resources that we can tap into in other similar cities and find out what they're doing, because like for the urban agriculture for Cleveland, we're being looked at as a best practice, and so other communities are coming to here. Other cities are coming to Cleveland to look at that. And so yes, we're looking at other resources, but we want to focus on what's happening in this region, because these are your coworkers or your cohort here, that it's a lot easier to drive, you know, across town to see a project than to go out to California to view something. So we think there's more capacity and more capability of those local projects to be replicated in a similar environment here.
Just a quick follow-up. One suggestion I had, which maybe you guys have already looked into or NEOSCC is looking into, if there is another grantee that's trying to tackle that issue of the cost of infrastructure and somehow quantifying that and looking at how it might play into different scenarios, I think that would be one that we could really use. I mean, if we can steal a technique or a template from somewhere else, it would be a lot easier than I think trying to recreate it here.
Hey, Freddie, I was going to tell you too. Now, it ain't similar. Like, it's not a region, but it's a comparison of cities. Like the Chamber, I'm on the Akron Chamber's board, and every couple of years they go to a city of a similar size and nature that are doing different things. You know, that they make and borrow some best practice for. Like I know 2 years ago they went to Milwaukee. And Milwaukee's doing a lot of progressive things, and especially the downtown area. And then this year in September we're going to Omaha. And I lived in Omaha for a number of years, but you know there is some stuff. Not I would say there are some regional things, but there are also some things that with cities kind of similar size and whatnot, they get best practices and stuff.
We co-chair the Communications and Engagement Committee, and part of our assignment is to try to get in-kind participation. So with regard regard to these four areas that we're working on, we've got policy, best practices, dashboard, and what's the fourth? Pilot project. So it's my understanding a staff person is assigned to kind of oversee or coordinate each of those.
Mm-hmm.
If you could describe who that is on each of those categories. And I think they may have started to meet,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be good to have some sense of how many are in our group, the board, are participating in those committees.
Okay. Well, first of all, Joe McDonald is heading up the dashboard group, and they have their first meeting on Thursday. And Kelly Britt is heading up policies. They met for the first time last week. And for the toolkit, there's Anthony in the back. He's heading up toolkit and best practices. And pilots was headed by Mark Barbesh, but he's no longer with NEOSCC, so we're figuring out who's going to be heading up that area. So I can be the contact in the meantime for that. And for the working groups that have been assembled or contacted thus far, it's people that had participated in work streams were asked if they wanted to continue participating. People who responded to the leverage match resource survey, they're being contacted as well. And for Kelly's group, let's see, Rachel was there and Mike, you were there. So it's a handful. I mean, better participation from the board would be great, but that's why I said if there's interest in participating, find us after the meeting and let us know.
Well, I wanted to make a little bit of a pitch that this is a core part of what we're trying to achieve. It is an opportunity to participate in some very concrete discussions and to give guidance to those where we go with those. So, and even with regard to Jason's question, is there an opportunity to have some engagement? Well, there is an opportunity, but there's a need to take some initiative to participate, and it will only be what we make of it. I see these four groups that are going to be meeting as that forum, which is the meeting of those groups, is probably the most significant place to participate in formulating the direction of those four areas. So I would encourage not just if you're interested. I think this is part of our core work. So if you can consider your in-kind participation, this is a way to fulfill that. Not only that, this is very substantive work. So it's one of the few opportunities that we're going to have in this project to actually participate in some substantive contribution to the framework that we're trying to establish. So I just wanted to encourage people to really strongly consider participating in those groups and bringing some contribution.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that plug. Any other?
I would I think both Fred and Michael, I think that's really important, because not only for the members of the board, but your staff. I mean, the products are the most tangible, on the ground opportunities. Most of your staff is very experienced in their sector. Can we tap into that to get that experience brought forward? Both Fred and Jason mentioned the engagement opportunity across communities. And I would just put out, Bill, I put it out to you really, because we went through that with the learning, the Tech Belt learning sessions. Communities in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Youngstown for about 3 years, with a modest amount of funding, I think, from the Wien Foundation, convened community actors in those three communities in Cleveland, in Youngstown, and Pittsburgh to learn about issues around industrial cities, shrinking cities, community development work. and it was extraordinarily valuable for a variety of reasons, including people just getting to know and work with folks who are dealing with many of the same challenges across different geographies. It did lead, I think one can say, it did lead to some of the acceleration of the land bank process that came out of Cleveland at Cuyahoga County as a trial balloon or as a pilot project, and when it reached Youngstown and Pittsburgh, it became something that those communities wanted. And I'm going to suggest, Bill, that maybe we talk a little bit about what we can glean from that, but how to put these sorts of sessions together. If they're relatively low cost and they were very, very effective, there's an awful lot that can be learned across the region, and that it will be of lasting value, and that is something that can use a fair amount of local resource in terms of in-kind. Are there any other questions or comments on where we are now? So again, Sasaki and their team will be here next month. Mike, I'll get you more information on how the environmental framework is actually modeled into this, so that you get a level of comfort on that. But be prepared to ask some of those specific questions. In terms of our objectives in March to May, we have you have a packet of information. Again, this is the broad schedule with Fair Housing Forums as our principal engagement effort in March. April and May, the business as usual meetings, in which again we're asking your help in identifying and encouraging people to come to these meetings. And Grace, during the executive committee, had a great suggestion that we treat this as a community organizing opportunity, with all of us being community organizers, committing to identify and bring people to the meetings and get the people that we can entice to also commit. And we'll be working with Jeff on how to actually try that idea out. The other area is the online tool, the crowd gauge tool, which again we're using as part of the values phase of the scenario planning work. It might be applicable elsewhere. We will be having a review of the AI work coming out in June, and again, Jason, to your point, that's an area where this board needs to be involved and weigh in. We're going to have alternative scenarios planning workshops in July, and issue also the regional AI report in September, the final preferred workshops, and then the final reports coming out in October, and this phase of our work together being concluded by December. I won't go into great detail on this, but what we have done is to lay out the next several months on your sheets. And particularly important in March are as we're working on the business as usual scenario and the development of the fiscal impact presentation, are the Fair Housing Forums and the continued meetings at the county level. We will be sending out save the date. This is the graphic that Jeff and his team from our strategy have been developing to send out. So it's very critical that you help work with us on making sure the mailing list and the invite list is as robust as possible for these 6 meetings. It has a brief explanation and the locations and times for these meetings. In April, again, the end of April, we're going to be having the presentation of the business as usual case. We're going to be working through the AI work itself and continued development of the products and a call for best practices for the toolkit. Again, we're going to be bringing Sasaki into the board meeting in April in anticipation of the public meetings, April 30th, May 1st and 2nd. Part of that meeting will be a meeting program of those 3 days will be a meeting of our caucuses. We have a caucus set up, Joe, around transportation. We've been working with Brian Zimmerman at Cleveland Metro Parks to bring the parks boards together across Northeast Ohio. And Gina, I don't know if we've talked about the health boards, but in any great detail. But the idea is we'll have the whole team together. This is an opportunity for you and your colleagues to drill down on the business as usual scenario from the perspective of transportation, parks, and health. There are other caucuses we could create, but in the interest of time, and these are all caucuses where there's a key member that's been a very active participant in our board. And in terms of the public housing authorities, I think, again, we have been involved with them, but around the AI and the housing itself, if there's a need to bring those folks together during that period, we will do the same. And then in May, going forward, with the further engagement, product development will continue with the dashboard and toolkit. We will be live with our crowd gauge and continue with other meetings. Coming forward immediately are the meetings that are listed here: Medina, Wayne, and Trumbull. We are still working to get the Geauga and Lake County covered. We have other meetings. We're continuing to work with the Environmental Resource Technical Committee at NEFCO, with the Citizens Advisory Board at Eastgate, and we've had Patty Chobe organized a very productive meeting with the First Ring Suburbs, and now we're going to be meeting with their Economic Development Council. In terms of communications update, as Jeff would point out, we're going to be scheduling meetings over the next number of weeks with elected official editorial boards, developing a new handout, involved in writing additional letters, public or letters to the editor, editorials, developing the save the date, developing the public opinion poll, which runs simultaneously with crowd gauge, and launching a robust communications tool. Jeff and his team have done some tinkering with the web page to put the sort of a branding or an ad for events at the top, mixed in with our county meetings, our county photographs. We'll have 2 webinars also in late March to review the communications toolkit for the scenario planning process. The communications plan that we're launching is a robust one that goes beyond the usual and customary for neighborhood community meetings. We are committed to, and have been from the beginning, to exploring new ways of engaging the public, so using Cool Cleveland, using Facebook ads, promoted tweets, festivals and exhibits, using a business journal and Buzzbin magazine to cover the business community. But a key one is very much at the top, using the newspaper network affiliated with Condé Nast to drive advertisements, and also at the bottom dealing with the use of Google ads. So one of our hopes here is not only do we drive people to our meetings and to our sites, but we give you some better insight into some of the social media techniques that are available for your own work. Finally, we have the March list here, which you've got on green paper. This is if you take anything away, you take away the green paper. We did it that way so you remember where it is. These are the things to remember around the regional AI sessions. The save the date meetings will come out, so please save that date. We really do need your help over the next week or two on the review of the network of networks list that Cobalt has put together along with our staff. We'll have the 2 webinars on the communications toolkit and be working with Mike and his team, and Mike and Greg, on going out to deal with the leverage match. And on the back you have, again, the fair housing forms. So that concludes my report. Any other questions? Thank you.
I'm looking at the agenda, and I see an A, a B, a C, but it looks like we're missing D, E, F, G, that goes to I. Is that just a...
Oh, that's an insertion. That's supposed to be.
I see, okay. All right, so we're done then with the discussion part.
Jeff, is there anything else that we need to report on?
No, I think you covered a lot of it. I would just say when we were preparing for this meeting, one of our biggest objectives was that you kind of understood the scenario planning process, and really this is our opportunity. I mean, we've been meeting for a long time. We're going to be going out to the public at the end of April with the business as usual case. The fair housing forums are coming up. This is really the opportunity that kind of we've all been waiting for, to talk about scenario planning and to talk about our work. And so I would just urge all of you to pay attention in the next couple weeks as we're sending things out. Grace did recommend this morning that we charge each board member with bringing, at least 10 people to the workshops that are located in their area. And I think all of you have the network lists, so if you can review those and get those back to me. And this will be a good complement to the work that Patty's doing with the network leaders and the network that she's been building over the last 6 to 8 months. But really this is, I guess you could say this is prime time in a way. And so we're looking forward to working with all of you. And please don't hesitate to ask if you have any questions or you need additional information, because it's really important that you understand what we're doing as you go out and try to drive other people to our events. So,
Jeff, do you want to share some additional information with the board about the efforts you are putting forth on the editorial board meetings?
Sure. I think I've contacted some of you in the last couple of weeks about potentially appearing at an editorial board meeting, and due to scheduling and just trying to get the papers all aligned, we haven't gotten back to you with dates. But our philosophy has always been that we are going to do a pretty extensive outreach at the beginning of the scenario planning process in the next 2 months to the editorial boards of the major dailies as well as the weeklies throughout the 12 counties. And so the strategy that we've kind of taken with this is that we're going to localize each visit. And so what we're calling on is for Hunter to attend the meeting with the MPO or COG director from that region, depending on the paper, along with a couple of board members who can bring localized perspective to that meeting. This morning we had a great session led by our strategy on kind of the do's and the don'ts of editorial board sessions, as well as kind of formatting and tightening the agenda a bit. But what we're really looking to do is kind of tell the story about what we're about to embark on. And I think it was brought up this morning that a lot of the papers in the region have done a lot of coverage on some of the challenges that our region has, and some of the things have been well documented, as well as highlighting some of the collaboration that has occurred. And so I think what we're going to go, and our first meeting is this Thursday at the Plain Dealer, is really go and explain this is a fantastic opportunity for the region to kind of take a step forward and take a step forward through the scenario planning process and with the vision and framework that we develop coming out of it. And so if I do reach out to some of you to join these meetings, we will have a full prep session with you. It's not like we're going to send you in cold, but we are really formalizing and trying to customize each visit. And so in Akron, we're going to highlight issues in Summit County and in the greater Akron area. In Cleveland, we'll do the same. Out in Youngstown with the Vindicator, we'll do the same. And I think what our overall message is that we've been doing a lot of great collaboration on the ground through this effort in the last year and a half, and we're just going to build on that and kind of take it public. So are there any questions about that? I will say that a lot of the papers are very excited about this. I don't know if you've noticed some of the editorial coverage that we've gotten in the last 6 to 8 months from the Plain Dealer and the Beacon Journal, and some of the journalistic coverage we've gotten from the Vindicator. So I think this will be a very good time to kind of set the table for what we have coming up next. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Hunter and Sarah, also for your presentations. I think it is very apparent to all of us that there is a lot of work going on at the project office. And as Jeff stated, we are beginning to see a lot of folks talking about our work. And it's very important that we capitalize upon this momentum that we leverage the work that we've put forth to date to advance the agenda so we can get to where we need to by the end of the year. To that end, as both Hunter and Jeff mentioned, I did think this morning as we were meeting at the executive committee level about how to ensure that we engage people. And there's a lot of great things that we're putting together in terms of strategies to get people to the meetings, but we need to make sure that we don't miss that opportunity. I think Jeff was saying that we would like about 200, or maybe it was Hunter, but somebody was saying about 200 or so folks at each of the 6 scenario planning meetings. And when you think that's not really a lot of folks, but we need to make sure that there's at least 200 people. And in thinking about how to do that, I was thinking about community planning or community organizing efforts where each person, each member of the organization commits to bringing X amount of people. And I think Jeff arbitrarily assigned you 10. I wasn't going to be that hard, but Jeff is being more aggressive there. But if we each have to bring a number of people, and we can engage our colleagues from work, we can engage our friends, our families, and our neighbors to come, then we can be assured not only of having the participation, but having the participation because people really want to be there because they're thinking about how we've explained it to them and how we want to make sure that their voices are heard. So I think that's very important. And then, of course, all of the other efforts that we would be putting out there, such as advertisements and other solicitations, would just be additional folks there. So I do want to, again, reemphasize how important this board is in making sure that we engage everybody that we possibly can so that the output is meaningful. I mean, the entire objective here is to get people to really think about where they want Northeast Ohio to be by 2040 and to be able to communicate that. And in order for them to do that, we've got to give them information to be able to do that. So again, just urging the board for that engagement effort. And Jason?
Actually had a follow-up question on that. Jeff, I know you build up a pretty big network of people in the Young Leaders events that we had earlier in the process. Are they going to be invited to those scenario planning meetings, or is there a mechanism to try to get their participation?
Yeah, and Patty has done a great job of organizing all the different young leader groups throughout Northeast Ohio, and so we'll be charging them with coming as well. And I think what we learned from the young leaders is they want to go to something where they can make a difference. So I think this first set of workshops is a great opportunity for that. So it'll be kind of dual. Patty's driven and gotten this network across the 12 counties, but we also have all the attendees from those first set of meetings, which I think numbers in the close to 400 that we'll be inviting. I'll probably send out an email to them, basically inviting them to their own meeting within their own area. And as a follow-up to what I said before, you should feel free to contact us. I've been kind of mining through all of your organization's upcoming board meetings. So we're going to be reaching out to you to see if we can get on your board meeting agendas and come out and make a pitch, particularly in the next 4 to 5 weeks, so that they're aware of all the great work that you have been doing, as well as participate in the workshops going forward.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments for Hunter or the staff? Okay. Then moving along to the information items, I know we have the standing committee reports in our packages. Is there anything that we need to specifically highlight for the board?
I would only draw your attention to the technical steering committee minutes, and just not anything in particular, but simply to say that group has been meeting, working closely with the staff and consultants, dealing with the technical issues that are involved in scenario planning and fiscal impact analysis. So if you are interested in the sort of the inner workings of what's going into these, this is a pretty good summary, and as Sarah is responsible as the staff to that, to document that. There will be full documentation also from Sasaki as the project moves forward, but just to keep an eye on that so you know what's going in. And Mike, to your question about things like, is this input there, this is the group that we'll be using to make sure the technical work is in a form that the organizations that need to adopt it at the end can, because we've thought through all this and we're consistent across all 12 counties.
Anything under B, organization, Emma, that you wanted to highlight to the group?
The major note is on contracts that we are under contract with Sasaki now at $1.3 million, which was the authorized amount. But other than that, you have all our current our cash received, current position, expenditures through the end of January, and finally that fairly soon we will be closing out fiscal year 12 in order to prepare for our audit. So.
Thank you. Moving along to item number 6, old business. At the last meeting, we talked about protocols, and we had our attorney present to discuss different options for us in putting together the alternatives for us to engage in a physical or other type of meeting. Hunter or Emma?
I think you have at your table the result of that. The question came up, I remember the executive committee, and I think also perhaps at the board meeting, as we're going through the code, with regard to the question of remote attendance at meetings, particularly given the distances and weather issues that often apply. So what we have done, working with our attorney, is to prepare a decision memo for you. Our recommendations we present at this meeting, and if the board is so inclined to adopt the proposed code at the end of this brief at the next meeting in March. But basically, the policy framework notes that we are a nonprofit corporation, and as our attorney has indicated, we are free to create our own rules. But from the very beginning, the board has elected to operate as though it were a public body and to conform to make best efforts to conform to Ohio sunshine laws and other regulations. And that's in consideration of the number of public bodies represented at the board. The question of how to address someone who wishes to participate remotely, we recommended that a sort of a modified version of what one would do if strictly adhering to the sunshine law. And if one were strictly adhering to it, a member could participate but not be counted for quorum or vote. We are recommending that a member if a member and alternate are not available to attend a meeting in person due to unusual or unanticipated scheduling, conflicts or weather events, and there is sufficient telephone or internet technology to allow clear two-way communication between the remote member and the body, that the member could be allowed and permitted to participate. That this should be a revocable privilege. In other words, it should not be abused. And our attorney recommended that it only should happen at the most once a year. We note that we cannot guarantee technology. It's a best efforts circumstance. One of the questions came up about the quorum. We were recommending that the code clearly state that board members who are participating shall not be counted as establishing a meeting's quorum. So there needs to be a quorum of members actually attending for that board member to be participating, and that under those circumstances, a board member could be a full member making and amending motions and voting upon those motions in addition to participating in deliberations. In the absence of a quorum, as you know, a meeting can take place, no action can be taken at that meeting, and if someone were participating remotely, that would be permissible as well, but really revolving around the question of quorum. So at the bottom of page 3, you have the proposed Code of Regulations changes. We're suggesting you review those and that be put back on the agenda as old business at the March meeting and take it for a vote.
Any questions, comments?
Grace?
Yes.
I would have concerns for the chair in terms of being able to accommodate such a large board and also keep an eye on what's going on remotely. And then I wondered if in having a future meeting, assuming something like this passed, if it would be possible to put on the agenda that something to the effect of suitable electronic equipment for remote, et cetera, will or will not be available, just so people know that.
Okay.
My concern is more for you.
Yeah, no, that's a good suggestion.
Well, also, the second is a very good suggestion for the staff, so we're not running around trying to do hookups and we can't. Because we'll be, particularly when we're on the road, we'll be in all sorts of circumstances where it simply may not be possible. That's practical, certainly. And we should let people know ahead of time.
That the quorum has to be of those present, and not to include the person that's remote.
Okay. Mr. Haley?
I get the presumption would be that all members that would want to participate, given the parameters that you have a quorum, and it's a single time, that all the members that would want to participate remotely and vote remotely would have equal opportunity to do so. That's the presumption. You would have enough in terms of your capacity and technical equipment. I mean, you're talking about like 10, 12 people potentially could be remote. I've never attended a meeting where you've had that many people actually be able to participate fully remote without somebody getting dropped off or something. So I'm just saying I've not seen the technology yet, so I'm just
So we may just say we don't have the technology.
Yeah. Well, initially this came up as an idea, should something like a snowstorm happen where we absolutely had to have a vote, but we're unable to get together, this would be a way to do that. And I think generally speaking, it would be that kind of case that would drive the need for this. However, then as a secondary, it became an option or alternative for some folks who wanted to be able to participate, but wouldn't be able to participate because of their particular circumstance. They were on vacation that month or whatever. But certainly all of these concerns are very valid, and we will think very hard about them before we finalize the proposal.
And I would also say that doing nothing is an option. You can simply table this and say, we're not
more
going
attractive all of this.
Spoken
like a true lawyer.
Yeah.
We're simply trying to accommodate the board's interest in pursuing obscure legal points.
For compelling reasons.
Okay. Anything related to new business? The March watch list then?
I think we have
Is that the green paper that we've already spoken to?
Draw your attention again to the green paper. I expect that we did not give you the magnet to put it on your refrigerator door, but you can certainly do that if you wish.
It's like at the airport or something for boxes.
And Jeff informed me that we'd like to have, Emily wanted to make there you are. An announcement?
Yes, thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Shared with you at your place is information about the 71st Annual Human Service Institute that the Center for Community Solutions, my organization, is holding. We're doing something a little different this year, which is holding events throughout the region, the first of which will be next month at Kent State University in Portage County. The region that we operate in is the 12 counties of this body, plus an additional 4 kind of on the southern corners. So just wanted to share the information with you. I know many of you have attended the Human Service Institute in the past, and a lot of the issues, especially as they relate to health and kind of community planning and low and middle income people and access to services and jobs, really overlap the topics at the Institute with the kind of work that we're doing here with the Sustainable Communities Consortium. So I just wanted to share that information with you, encourage you all to attend. All of the events throughout the year are free, and we have registration for the first few over the next couple of months up on our website already, but please mark your calendars and encourage those that you think might be interested to attend as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that brings our meeting to a close. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second?
I said.
Second. Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you. And again, thank you very much for taking the time to attend and participate in this very important project.